For the past couple lessons, we've talked a lot about flashbacks and dreams, both of which are essentially simulating the contents of a character's mind so that your audience can see inside. So far, the visual components have played a crucial role in sharing this information with the viewer. However, sometimes when editing, you may need to simulate the process of hearing a character's thoughts, and unlike a typical flashback, you may not visually flash back or forward to other footage from your film. Instead, you accomplish the same effect by placing a heavy focus on sound stylization. So, when will you encounter situations like this? Well, maybe it's because your character is a genius, and you need to show the audience the beauty of their mind. Or maybe it's to reveal the depth of a character's shallow nature.
Jesus. That is really super. How'd a nitwit like you get so tasteful?
I can't believe that Bryce prefers Van Patten's card to mine.
But wait, you ain't seen nothing yet.
The use cases here are pretty limitless. These types of thought simulations belong to the same family of editorial techniques as flashbacks and dream sequences, since all live inside a character's mind. However, there are three key differences here. The first key difference is that thought simulations like these are typically short to medium in length. Where flashbacks can be entire sections of the film, thought simulations are usually only a few seconds to a minute at most, just a glimpse. Second, these thought simulations are focused largely, if not exclusively, on audio manipulation. And the third difference between flashbacks and thought simulations is that thought simulations are aimed at learning about the character's personality and their state of mind, and they're a lot less about telling large pieces of the story. So this all brings up a good question. When do we need to simulate a character's thoughts versus just letting the story and the film fill in that information? Is it too heavy-handed to tell your audience these things versus just showing them? In the film we're editing, Chapman, we've got a scene that takes place in Alex's apartment, scene 12. In it, he's decided to fly home to Colorado to attend Marie's funeral. He's a bit conflicted on whether or not to go, but with the way things were written in the original script, it wasn't really clear why he was hesitant, which is something that we'd like to at least hint at. Here, we're choosing to use only sound to subtly accomplish this, because in the film, we'll ultimately end up seeing full, extended visual flashbacks of these memories later on when their relevant story points get fully fleshed out. Now, I'd like to point out here that what was shot on set was a little bit different than what's in the script. Namely, that scene 13 with Sailor visiting him in his apartment wasn't filmed at all. And also, we've got some extra shots of Alex looking at the letter with the funeral invitation and packing a bag in anticipation of leaving to attend the funeral. This is all just another example and a reminder that what's in the script isn't always what you're going to actually receive in the way of footage. So you'll need to be ready to evaluate what you do have and then adapt your edit accordingly. So let's start out by watching the final sequence that we've built. Then we're going to go back and look at how we put it all together.
Look at what you did to me. Tell me what happened.
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna get ready? I'm worried about you.
That she was in love with you? Wake up!
Okay, so there's quite a bit going on there, which is definitely worth a closer look. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to dive into the timeline and then we're going to deconstruct every part of this scene. All right, I'll see you in a bit. In the last lesson, we looked at how a character's thoughts and memories might be simulated with sound. We saw a few examples of this, and then we reviewed some of the characteristics of this technique. Now, we're going to learn how something like this actually gets put together on the timeline. The key to getting something like this to work effectively is to carefully distinguish the difference between the sounds of the real world and the sounds inside your character's mind. On our timeline here, we start out in the previous scene, just for a point of reference. Let's ignore that for a minute. What really matters here is that the beginning of our scene starts out with Alex's real-world sound. When we're in the normality of the scene, the environmental sounds, along with any other characters present, should be of an audible volume and untreated with effects. Everything should sound present and real. Next, we transition into Alex's head and we begin hearing his thoughts. As we move inside the character's mind and begin hearing any memories that they might have, the sound of the world around them will need to almost entirely fade away. This will be accomplished with level adjustments, EQ adjustments, and reverb. Simultaneously, remembered voices in their head and sound effects that support their memories should become louder and be treated with only a moderate amount of reverb. And finally, the sound that should be the most present, the loudest, and feel the closest to us is the sound of the character's own voice inside their head, if that's something that we're also simulating. In this case, we actually won't be doing that. Moving down to the last section of the scene, we come back to the presence of real-world sound as we exit Alex's mind. Okay, let's back up a bit, and let's look at exactly how we constructed this scene and its corresponding layers of sound to achieve the desired effect of going inside Alex's head and hearing his thoughts. We started with part of the previous scene, scene 11, just so that we'd have something to build off of. As you can see, we grabbed this section of the film from the pre-edited scenes available in the downloads area. We simply cut in the picture, along with its corresponding split audio tracks, which consisted of dialogue and stereo effects, and then we dropped in some music from the custom score for the film. Next, we added in the first few shots here in scene 12. We've got a shot of Alex sitting on the couch, nursing his burned finger. We chose shot 12A, take 2. Next, we cut in a wide shot of Alex picking up the letter off his coffee table. For this, we chose shot 12, take 4. And you can also see that we added a resize effect to simulate a slow drift in. We started the sizing at 100%, and then we zoomed in over the course of the shot to about 105%, nice and subtle. But it's enough to draw the viewer in and focus their attention on what Alex is doing. A slow push-in like this often screams, "This is important, pay attention." And the last shot that we dropped in to flesh out the opening of this scene was back to the same angle as the first one, shot 12A, take 2. Here, we've got a closer shot of Alex with the letter in hand, looking at it and stressing about his upcoming trip. And again, we added a resize effect to simulate a slow push-in, again starting at 100% and pushing into about 105%. We also added this little paper rustle Foley effect to the moment when Alex picks up the letter in the previous shot. You can see that we faded out the dialogue stem by the end of our last shot, since it contained a lot of room tone, which is going to need to fade away for us to simulate Alex's thoughts. And we did the same, fading out our effects stem. And then the custom music score that was being used over the previous scene has already faded itself out a little bit earlier just by the natural place where the cue ended, so there's really nothing for us to worry about there. As a reminder, on a real production, you'd probably have cut the previous scene from scratch, so you'd have a lot of individual layers of dialogue, ambient, sound, and music. But for the sake of teaching purposes, and not demonstrating the editing of every single scene in this feature, we chose to use the pre-edited scene so that we only had to deal with the dialogue stem, the effects stem, and some music. Okay, so this section here is pretty much the extent of the normality in this scene. All of this will have natural, realistic sounding audio and will represent Alex being present in his real environment. And this all happens before we start venturing into his head, which, knowing Alex, is kind of a scary thought. Alright, just for demonstration purposes, let's pop on a 235 matte and a quick and dirty color grade. This is just going to help the footage in this scene match the scene that we're coming out of. It's not perfect, but it'll do the trick for now. Now, moving forward in the sequence from left to right, let's look at just the picture first. We've got this next shot of Alex, ghosted on top of himself, quickly running around his apartment and packing a bag. This is actually the same shot layered on top of itself, but as you're going to see, there's different speed effects going on so that he ends in the same place, but his location throughout the shot is different. The top shot is superimposed at 50% over the bottom shot of Alex, and both are sped up quite substantially, with the top version at about 950% speed and the bottom at about 1100% speed. Like I said, the shots are timed out slightly differently, but they end up with Alex roughly in the same place at the end, with the top ghosted shot fading out, leaving us only one version of Alex standing in front of his bag here. Then, in real time, Alex pulls out his cell phone to book his flight. Now, if it were me, I probably would have booked my flight before packing, but then again, I also don't huff paint and steal cars, so you do you, Alex. Alright, now over all three shots, we've added another slow resize effect, which continues focusing our attention on Alex, drawing us closer into his actions and thoughts. Again, we went from 100% to 105% resize here, and all this footage was found in shot 12, take 3. Moving forward with the visuals, we've got this close-up shot of Alex as his eyes glance downward toward the phone in his hand. And of course, we've got his corresponding POV shot showing us the phone, which contains the flight booking app that he's using. Now, since we're here, I'll just point out that we dropped in a little bit of production audio. This was just to include the sound of Alex reaching into his pocket and taking out his phone. Alright, so now in this last section of visuals, we just started with some very rough cutting of him staring down, lost in thought. Because the scene wasn't actually filmed with the intention of simulating his thoughts like this, we had to work around some challenges. For example, halfway through all the takes of this angle, 12C, Alex actually hears Sailor knocking on the door from what was originally going to be shot as scene 13. So in response to that knock, he says,
"What?"
This line obviously doesn't work if we're simulating Alex deep in thought, so we had to cut around it. We knew that we wanted Alex to look down for a while, thinking, then at the end, kind of wake up, so to speak, and then look back up if possible. Fortunately, we did find both of these movements in shot 12C, take 3, though we had to cut around his what line, which resulted in a jump cut between the two sections of the shot. That's not a problem though, we can deal with that later. Now, before we were able to get too deep into exactly what the visuals ultimately ended up doing, it was important for us to lay down the dialogue and the voices that Alex was hearing in his mind, and this was primarily for timing purposes. Here on our top dialogue track, we went through the script and found lines that we felt would indicate some form of trouble from his past, helping to explain why he's so nervous about his trip. Once we picked out some lines that we felt worked, we went into the dailies of each corresponding scene, and we found the lines and then just cut them into our timeline. We ended up with these lines from his old friend Paul.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
These lines from Marie.
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna be alright? I'm worried about you.
And then these additional lines also from Paul.
Is that what you thought? That she was in love with you? Wake up!
We felt that these told a good story of some past tragedy, some concern for Marie, and then also some sort of competition with Paul for Marie's love. The fact that we were able to make the last line say, "wake up," from Paul was just one of those serendipitous moments, since it's actually going to work perfectly to help snap Alex out of his deep thought. Now, since we're inside Alex's head here, these thoughts and memories shouldn't sound completely realistic and natural. To address that, we duplicated all the lines down here on track A2, and we made a mixdown of them all together, applying a healthy dose of reverb to them. If your software uses nests, you just copy the dialogue onto A2 and then make a nest out of the second bunch. The point is just to be able to apply an effect across all these lines so that they blur into each other. Now, here's what just this reverb-affected batch of memory dialogue sounds like.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna be alright?
she was in love with you? Wake up!
As you can probably tell, it sounds cool, but it's near impossible to make out anything anybody's saying. And that's why we also left the original unaffected lines up here on A1 as well. This way, we can very quickly and easily adjust the levels of the reverb lines or the original clearly spoken lines, even keyframing the levels up and down if we wanted some sections to sound more echoey than others. Combined, the two layers of dialogue sound like this.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Much better. And for a little extra flair, we copied Paul's line saying happened,
Tell me what happened!
and placed the copy on audio track 3, moved it down a few frames, and applied heavy reverb to it, which gave us this.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna be alright? I'm worried about you.
Is that what you thought? That she was in love with you? Wake up!
All this memory dialogue is working well back here, so we chose to add a little bit more of the same style earlier in the scene to help us begin the initial transition into his head and tease at his thoughts a little bit. To accomplish this, we found some flirtatious dialogue between Alex and Marie in the treehouse scene. We applied some heavy reverb, gradually faded it on, and then used a mixdown or nest of the last line in the clip with even more reverb to echo it out under picture, which gave us this. So at this point, we've got the basic structure of the scene working. We see Alex in his apartment looking at the funeral invitation. We've got a cool little sequence of him packing and looking up flights on his phone. And then we've got a close-up on his face while we hear his thoughts and his memories, before he finally comes to, presumably with a newfound resolve and ready to head out. So let's look at what we have so far.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna be alright? I'm worried about you.
Is that what you thought? That she was in love with you? Wake up!
Okay, pretty cool. But the big thing this scene is really missing to sell the idea of being inside Alex's mind is sound. A lot more sound. We're effectively fading out of the real world sound from the beginning of the scene and then simulating the voices in his head through reverb and other audio manipulation. But we still need to include more layers of otherworldly sound design. That's all going to play out while we're inside his head in this section. Then we need to build out some more realistic sound effects from Alex's environment for us to come back to at the end, after we leave his head and after we stop hearing his thoughts. And of course, we still got to figure out what to do about that jump cut on his close-up up here. So the first thing we did was lay in some tonal music for the section of the cut while we're inside Alex's head. We actually grabbed this droning track from the film's score. It's track 3, and it sets a perfect mysterious and introspective atmosphere. Now for my favorite part, playing with cool sound effects. So the plan here, during Alex's close-up thought section, is to build up a series of sound accents. One that brings us definitively into his mind. One that brings us out of his mind. And then we need to build a series of accents that can fall in between the various lines of memory dialogue. Let's play through this section so you can hear how the sound design is working.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna get ready? I'm worried about you.
That she was in love with you? Wake up!
Alright, so at this point, you can hear that we've created quite an alternate world of sound to accent Alex's thoughts, and to give a feeling of anxiety and a rush of memories. The majority of the sound design that we chose were whooshes like these, glitchy pulses like this, and, as it so happens, whooshing train sounds at the beginning and the end. Which brings us into and out of his environment nicely, since we have some distant train ambience way earlier in the scene. Alright, so let's take a look at this thought sequence with all of our sound design in place, still with only this simple visual close-up of Alex.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna get ready? I'm worried about you.
That she was in love with you? Wake up!
So with all the sound design and the dialogue intercut with each other, it's time to bounce back up to the visuals and see if we can use all these audio accents that we've created to motivate some interesting accents in the visuals. Just a tip, ping-ponging back and forth like this, between editing picture to figure out where some of the audio goes, and then editing audio to figure out where some of the picture goes, is a very common technique when you start refining a cut. So you can see here on V2, we've got quite a lot going on with the visuals compared to what we started with. Keep in mind that none of this is required at all, and if you'd prefer to keep your cut more understated, that's completely fine. Our goal here is to push things as far as we can to show you what's possible. So here on V2, we found part of the take where the camera panned up, which we sped up even further to get something like this.
Look at what you did to me!
For the rest of this section, we used a combination of color effects to play with exposure, dissolves in and out of slightly different takes to get kind of a ghosted, fragmented feel on Alex's head, superimposes on top of the original shot on V1, and then a handful of other speed effects here and there. The goal was to create visual accents to play with the sound accents in between the phrases of dialogue that he's hearing inside of his head. At the end of the sequence, we used a combination of a superimpose effect and a long dissolve to layer two takes of Alex on top of each other, making it appear that his ghosted version left the screen, leaving him standing there, snapped back into reality. So, if I wanted to get deep, I could say that this is meant to symbolize his mental self-commitment to the trip, and then he leaves, while his real body stays there still nervous. But for the most part, I just kind of thought it was a cool effect, and it was worth exploring. Something like this could absolutely end up on the cutting room floor if the director wasn't a fan. So let's play this whole section with sound to get a feel for how it's working.
Look at what you did to me! Tell
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna get ready? Right now.
Thought that she was in love with you? Wake up!
So this is just about the end of the work that this scene needs, although there is one more very important sound consideration that we need to address. Earlier in the lesson, we talked about the need to start in a person's normality, with real sounds from their world. Then sounds from their world fade away, and are replaced with otherworldly tones, sound design, and dialogue, all sprinkled with generous helpings of reverb. And then, of course, at the end, finally, we're back inside their normality, and we're back to real sound. So look at the end of our scene here, where Alex comes out of his deep thought, and the voices in his head are gone.
Thought that she was in love with you? Wake up!
It's definitely clear that he's snapping out of his daydream, but we really haven't yet brought back in the sounds of his environment to bring us full circle. So we can start by bringing back in the room tone of his apartment here, some police sirens from the street, and some dogs barking in the distance, to which we've applied some additional EQ to strip out the highs and the mids, which pushes the sound further back into the distance. Played by themselves, we've got this. And fully mixed, our scene sounds like this.
Thought that she was in love with you? Wake up!
Now, for the final piece of sonic detail, we can just add in some of these similar dog barking sounds to the beginning of the scene, which is really going to help to cue the viewer into the sounds of the environment from where we start to where we end up. Wow. So that was a lot of sound design work for what was actually a relatively short scene, only about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and play the entire scene again, with all of our layers of sound and picture laid in to see what we ended up with.
Look at what you did to me! Tell me what happened!
Marie?
Alex, are you gonna get ready? Right now.
Thought that she was in love with you? Wake up!
All right, and there's the final product. Now it's your turn to try it out. This lesson has some homework. First, add in a bit of the pre-edited scenes onto your timeline at the start of the sequence, so that you have something to transition from into this new scene. The section that you're going to need is about 11 minutes and 45 seconds into the pre-edited feature. Second, rough cut the picture and production audio from scene 12 onto your timeline. We obviously veered quite a bit away from the script here, so check out the PDF below this lesson for guidance as to the story that we told in this scene, along with the shots that we used. Next, edit your sound and music bed. This is the key part of this lesson, so take your time here. You may want to reference the lesson on one monitor while editing on the other to remember how we handled certain situations, or just get creative and go crazy. And last, craft your visual effects the way that you like them, and then tweak the sound as needed to support them. Coming up in the next lesson, We're going to go deeper into the world of sound, and we're going to focus on bringing a scene to life with numerous layers of Foley effects. Alright, I'll see you in a bit.